Academia Mexicana de Ciencias.
Buenas tardes. La Academia Mexicana de Ciencias y el Centro de Investigación y de Estudios Avanzados les dan la más cordial bienvenida a la ceremonia de ingreso del doctor Hendrik Nijmeijer como miembro correspondiente de la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias. Nos acompañan en el presidium el doctor Carlos Coello, miembro del Consejo Directivo, quien viene en representación del doctor José Luis Morán López, presidente de la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias. Gabriel López Castro, secretario académico, en representación del doctor José Mustre de León, director general del Cinvestav. El doctor Hendrik Nijmeijer, nuevo miembro correspondiente de la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias. El doctor Rafael Castro Linares, investigador del Departamento de Ingeniería Eléctrica del Cinvestav. Toma la palabra el doctor el doctor Gabriel Castro, quien dirigirá unas palabras de bienvenida.
Muy buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por asistir a esta ceremonia especial en la cual se le da la bienvenida como miembro correspondiente al doctor Hendrik Nijmeijer, ¿es correcto? De la Universidad Técnica de Eindhoven. Como soy muy malo para improvisar, siempre traigo un pequeño acordeón para guiarme. Profesor Nijmeijer, bienvenido al Cinvestav. El doctor José Mustre de León se disculpa por no poder asistir hoy, tuvo que atender un meeting urgente en la Secretaría de Educación Pública debido a las negociaciones que se están llevando a cabo ahora por el emplazamiento a huelga del sindicato de nuestra institución. Pero a través de mi persona le envía la más cordial y calurosa bienvenida a México. I'm sorry, I think I am allowed to speak in Spanish. That's what Professor Coelho told me. That's right. Bueno, más allá de los logros impresionantes de la carrera del doctor Nijmeijer, en un momento nos lo va a describir el doctor Rafael Castro Linares. Pues estamos muy felices de tener esta ceremonia en el Cinvestav por diferentes razones. El doctor Nijmeijer ha contribuido de manera muy importante al desarrollo científico en México, que es uno de los requisitos que tiene la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias para elegir a sus miembros correspondientes. Entre estas, pues ha formado a varios doctores en México y tenemos conocimiento que desde ya hace muchos años ha participado de manera activa en diferentes conferencias y escuelas, contribuyendo de esta manera también de forma indirecta a la formación de muchos jóvenes. Nosotros esperamos que con este ingreso, y es otro de los motivos por los cuales nos sentimos muy honrados de tenerlo aquí en el Cinvestav, pues con este ingreso de alguna manera contribuye a que los lazos de colaboración que existen entre su universidad y México se refuercen e incluso se extiendan con otros grupos de colaboración que hacen control automático y mecatrónica en México. Leía en la página del profesor Nijmeijer, cuando describe la solución a problemas de transporte en Holanda, una frase que guiaba sus temas de investigación. Se refería a él a pensar fuera en inglés, out of the box, en la solución de estos problemas. Y pienso que eso es algo que hace mucha falta. En México estamos muy preocupados por las evaluaciones que nos hacen en diferentes instancias, y como que nuestra investigación muchas veces se dirige en ese sentido, y hace mucha falta pensar fuera de la caja para poder hacer una investigación creativa y original. En unos momentos vamos a escuchar su plática, en la que seguramente tendremos de manera más precisa información al respecto. Bueno, pues por todas estas razones es un gran honor darle la más cordial y calurosa bienvenida al doctor Nijmeijer al Cinvestav. Please, Professor Nijmeijer, enjoy this ceremony. Thank you for coming to Cinvestav. Thank you.
Gracias, doctor Castro. A continuación, el doctor Rafael Castro presentará la semblanza del doctor Nijmeijer.
Bueno, a partir de las palabras o de la semblanza que nos fue pedida por la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias, me permito leer algunos datos importantes de la vida del doctor Nijmeijer. Él nació en los Países Bajos, en Holanda, realizó sus estudios profesionales y de posgrado en la Universidad de Groningen, en Países Bajos, también en Holanda. Obtenió el grado de doctor en 1983. Ha sido asistente de enseñanza a tiempo parcial en el Departamento de Economía de la Universidad de Groningen y también de investigación en el Centro de Matemáticas de Amsterdam en los Países Bajos, en Holanda. También profesor en la Facultad de Matemáticas Aplicadas de la Universidad de Twente de Países Bajos, en Holanda, y profesor a tiempo parcial en el Departamento de Ingeniería Mecánica de la Universidad Tecnológica-Eindhoven, en los Países Bajos, y actualmente ya es profesor a tiempo completo en la especialidad de Dinámica y Control de Sistemas en esa institución. También a partir de ese año el doctor Nijmeijer es profesor a tiempo parcial, en 2015 quiero decir, en el Departamento 3ME de la Universidad Tecnológica-Eindhoven en los Países Bajos. Bueno, el doctor Nijmeijer ha recibido numerosos premios y reconocimientos, entre los que destacan el premio del Instituto de Ingenieros Eléctricos, el Heaviside Premium, en 1988 a 1989 corresponde el premio. Él es además Senior Member en el Instituto de Ingenieros en Electricidad Electrónica, IEEE, desde 1991, y a partir de 2000 es Fellow Member del mismo instituto, por sus contribuciones a la teoría y aplicación del diseño de sistemas no lineales de control. También tiene nombramiento del Golden Feedback Club, Caballero del Lazo Dorado de Control de la Universidad Noruega de Ciencia y Tecnología en Trondheim, Noruega, que le fue dado en 2011. Y el premio en 2015 de la revista IEEE, de la revista Control System Technology. Y además el doctor Nijmeijer dirige varios proyectos de investigación importantes, entre los que destaca el proyecto IKB, de sus siglas en inglés, que es Integrated Cooperative Automated Vehicles, que dio una muy buena conferencia en martes sobre ese tema. El doctor Nijmeijer es además integrante de comités editoriales de varias revistas especializadas de circulación internacional y ha sido editor invitado para varias ediciones especiales en estas revistas. Es autor de 400 artículos en revistas de reconocido prestigio, de 40 capítulos de libro y de alrededor de 500 artículos de conferencia. También ha escrito y editado alrededor de 13 libros en su especialidad. La trayectoria científica del doctor Nijmeijer es reconocida mundialmente por sus trabajos de investigación en la teoría de control de sistemas dinámicos no lineales, en la cual ha publicado un libro, el cual es una referencia obligada sobre el tema. En la teoría de control geométrico para sistemas lineales, y no lineales, así como la aplicación de la teoría del control a robótica, control de barcos, dinámica de vehículos y sistemas automotrices. En particular, una de las pasiones del Dr. Nijmeijer es el estudio de la sincronización de sistemas dinámicos. La colaboración del Dr. Nijmeijer con la comunidad científica mexicana ha sido intensa y altamente productiva. Desde el año de 1989, hace 29 años, el Dr. Nijmeijer ha realizado varias estancias de investigación en diversas instituciones mexicanas, el Cinvestav, el CICESE, el IPCIT, entre otras, impartiendo cursos y conferencias, además de participar en diversos congresos como conferencista invitado y como miembro del comité de programa. De igual manera, ha sido el director de tesis de doctorado de 5 estudiantes mexicanos. También ha realizado investigaciones conjuntas con varios investigadores mexicanos, los cuales han realizado estancias de investigación en las universidades donde ha trabajado el Dr. Nijmeijer. El Dr. Nijmeijer ha publicado un libro y 5 capítulos del libro con los estudiantes mexicanos que ha asesorado, así como alrededor de 25 artículos en revistas especializadas de alto prestigio y aproximadamente 37 artículos en congresos internacionales, todos con colegas mexicanos. La actividad científica y las publicaciones del Dr. Nijmeijer han tenido una notable influencia a nivel mundial. Con México, el Dr. Nijmeijer ha tenido un productivo historial de colaboraciones e interacciones que han influenciado el desarrollo y la consolidación de varios grupos nacionales en el campo del control automático, del que forman parte varios de los estudiantes mexicanos que ha formado, siendo sus artículos y libros de referencia obligados en los posgrados en esta importante área de ingeniería. En resumen, el Dr. Nijmeijer ha contribuido de manera importante con la comunidad científica mexicana, formando recursos de alto nivel y estableciendo una escuela cuyas bases son la excelencia y más que nada la pasión por la investigación. Dear Hank, I want to thank you for all the years of a wonderful collaboration. The Mexican community in automatic control, and particularly the former Mexican students, thank you very much, and I'm very grateful for this wonderful cooperation. Thanks a lot.
Gracias, doctor Castro. A continuación, el doctor Carlos Coello dirigirá unas palabras y al final de estas hará entrega del diploma correspondiente.
Buenas tardes. Doctor Gabriel López Castro, secretario académico del Cinvestav, en representación del doctor José Mustre León, director general del Cinvestav, doctor Hendrik Nijmeijer, distinguido miembro de nuevo ingreso a nuestra academia, doctor Rafael Castro Linares, investigador del Departamento de Ingeniería Eléctrica del Cinvestav. Y el doctor Álvarez y Casa de la UNAM. Estimados colegas, amigos, tengo el agrado de dirigirme a ustedes a nombre del doctor José Luis Morán López, presidente de la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias, quien les envía un cordial saludo y les agradece su hospitalidad. La figura de miembro correspondiente de la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias reconoce la trayectoria y obra de investigadores muy distinguidos, radicados fuera de México, que han contribuido a desarrollar la ciencia en nuestro país. Al día de hoy, la Academia Mexicana de Ciencias está conformada por 2.708 miembros, de los cuales 2.601 son miembros regulares, y con el doctor Nijmeijer tenemos 107 miembros correspondientes, que incluyen a 11 premios Nobel. Entre los aspectos que quisiera subrayar del ingreso del doctor Nijmeijer a nuestra academia, en primer lugar está su trabajo en la formación de recursos humanos, particularmente con nuestro país, como ya lo mencionó el doctor Castro, desde 1993. Su compromiso en este rubro se ha consolidado con la dirección de tesis de doctorado de varios estudiantes mexicanos, quienes hoy laboran en prestigiosas instituciones de investigación en México. Asimismo, de 1990 a la fecha, varios estudiantes e investigadores han realizado estancias cortas de investigación, postdoctorales y sabáticas en su universidad. Otro aspecto de gran relevancia es su colaboración con grupos de investigación mexicanas, que desde 1989 han mantenido principalmente con académicos del Cinvestav, CICESE, IPCIT y la UNAM. El trabajo que el doctor Nijmeijer ha realizado con estos grupos de científicos ha redundado en la realización de fructíferas actividades académicas y de numerosas publicaciones como libros y artículos indizados en revistas internacionales de gran prestigio, como ya mencionó el doctor Castro. La colaboración del doctor Nijmeijer también ha llevado al desarrollo de importantes proyectos tecnológicos entre México y Holanda, así como la firma de convenios que han facilitado el intercambio académico de estudiantes de posgrado. Todo lo anterior confirma el compromiso del doctor Nijmeijer con nuestro país. Su notable labor, aunada a sus contribuciones de talla internacional en el área de la tecnología, en particular en el campo del control y sistemas dinámicos, lo han hecho merecedor de importantes reconocimientos. Con su incorporación a nuestra academia, la comunidad científica mexicana seguirá enriqueciéndose con su generoso trabajo a través de su creatividad y de su entusiasmo. Muchas gracias. El micrófono, vamos a proceder a la entrega del diploma.
Nos ponemos de pie si son tan amables.
It's an honor for the Mexican Academy of Science to give you a diploma as a member, and please receive the diploma. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Les pedimos a los miembros del Presidium si pueden pasar a sus lugares acá en la primera fila. A continuación, el doctor Nijmeijer dictará la conferencia Dynamics and Control of Cooperation.
Thank you. I must admit, my Spanish is very poor, but I've seen the document and I've heard some very nice words. So I think I'm a member now. So I feel proud. So I could also say the work is done. So let's celebrate. But with pleasure, I will give a talk on cooperation. It's on dynamics control of cooperation, but I took this title very deliberately for today as also expressing the cooperation that I have had and still have with many Mexican students and researchers. I have tried to avoid any equations. There is only 1 or 2 slides with equations. So that's probably good, but also very difficult for me sometimes. So you must forgive me if that's too less technical. I more or less organized the talk as follows. First, I will say a few words about myself. I heard a very extensive introduction of my CV previously, so that's probably not necessary anymore. But anyways, I didn't know you were going to do so. Then I will talk, basically, sort of run through a few aspects that I find relevant. Okay. Dynamics and control of robots. Then Huygens synchronization. Then, in fact, back to dynamics and control, but now for cars, sort of an extension of the robot part. And then finally, I will say a few words of tanks. That's more or less the program. Just to warm up, I'm coming from the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a very small country in Europe. Number of inhabitants in the Netherlands is more or less the same as in Mexico City. It gives you an impression where we talk about. I'm working in Eindhoven, and probably Eindhoven, this is probably a very small city. We call it a city, but compared to where I'm now, it's probably too tiny. 250,000 inhabitants. We have this is a sort of representation of the Netherlands. I guess everyone knows Amsterdam airport, the main airport. We have the seaport, Rotterdam, and the brains are in Eindhoven. It's officially used as Brainport and is very much advertised. It's really a high-tech environment, a very exciting high-tech environment. Probably you know it as the hometown of Philips, but nowadays DAF Trucks is also famous. ASML and many spin-off companies originally from Philips that are almost larger than Philips today. So it's really a high-tech environment. Yes, as said, I work at Eindhoven University of Technology. It's a pure technical university, no science, social science, or languages, or whatever. You see 9 departments, all technical style. Relatively a small university, certainly in comparison with some of the universities I've seen here. 12,000 students, but it gives you an impression. And it's not always as sunny as you see here. About myself, just a few words. I'm a professor in dynamics and control, and I really stress, the two subjects, the two themes in my chair are important, not only the control, not only dynamics, but often the combination. And the chair is within the Department of Mechanical Engineering. I also chair the Dutch Institute of Systems and Control, which is sort of responsible for educating the PhDs throughout the country. In comparison with Mexico, we have a teaching part for the PhDs that is done centrally. Netherlands is not so big. Students can travel early in the morning up to Utrecht, which is in the center of the country, and at the late afternoon return. Very successful program, I would say, with all modesty as a scientific director, of course. I'm also director of the automotive master program, automotive technology. And my first moment I came in touch with Mexico really was upon an invitation of Rafael Castro Linares. I think it must have been, the invitation must have been somewhere 1988 or maybe early 89. But that was really the first time when you invited me to give I spent here 2 weeks at the Institute and gave a course, a short course on nonlinear dynamical control systems. Actually, that was about the time that my first book on dynamical control systems appeared. It's still available. Some people still ask me to sign a copy of the book. I'm willing to do that afterwards again. I'm not going to expand really on that part of research where I've worked a lot and I'm still working a lot on is the pure, more fundamental nonlinear control. I want to entertain you a bit more with robotics, cooperation in robotics, and the like. And first and for all, for me, cooperation is, for today at least, synonym for coordination, synchronization, and I will explain in a second what that means, but I use these words really simultaneously. Don't sort of feel confused. What is the difference? There's no difference for today. What is synchronization? I often give talks on synchronization, and every time I sort of add a few examples and delete a few other examples. Synchronization is probably the easiest way to explain is this. You're sort of wondering what I'm saying. I should go back to the microphone. This is, of course, not good for the tape, the videotape. What I wanted to show, walking is a form of antiphase synchronization. If you just consider what you do with your legs, you sort of see, you make a step with one feet, thereafter the next feet. If you do it more carefully, and would watch more carefully to me, I'm not going to repeat it, don't worry. You use your arms also in a very particular way. Well, a kangaroo, I can do that, but I won't do that, does it differently. A horse does it in various ways. Galloping, trottle, even more. It's very interesting. Yeah, in nature there are animals really moving, walking, running, throttling in a very different way. All is about somehow synchronization, all is about, say, the dynamics, the motion in time, and what there is some coincidence of that. Some phase or in-phase or anti-phase motion may happen. Think about my legs, the horse example. Many variations of this are possible. I come across a few more. This is, to me, I on purpose, I just picked this up from internet last night. Humans have always been able to collaborate. Also to make very huge constructions, and here in Mexico, there are a few very beautiful examples of that. But if you start to think, how were people able to make these enormous constructions without modern tools, it becomes interesting. You need collaboration. If you want to lift, two people want to lift a very heavy stone, and you want to climb a stairs, then of course you have to do it in a coordinated fashion, very coordinated fashion. Very interesting. You find this everywhere around the world. The dolmen in Ireland is another example, but there are many more, of course. You can imagine that. Now, enough of general things. The first, no, this is not the first. One of the first Mexican students of mine is Alejandro Rodriguez. Where is Alejandro now? Alejandro. But it fits well for what I'm going to show. He started in the Netherlands in 1998, I think, when I was still working in Enschede. And I moved in 2000 to Eindhoven, and I sort of suggested him to follow me to Eindhoven, and he did. And his work was on, say, applying ideas of coordination, synchronization in robotics. And what you see here on this slide is we had two robots at hand, and you will see them moving in a minute. There will be a movie very shortly. But you see two identical robots. This is Alejandro in the good times, when he was younger. No, this is, I think, a very recent picture of yours. By the way, the work his thesis was 2004, and with some extra work, we published this as a book with World Scientific. Very interestingly, this work was sort of very little noticed in the first years after, and now it's becoming more and more recognized as really, I think, sort of breakthrough in this coordination of robotic systems. The goal was to have the robots to execute a common task, so execute a common motion. The same motion is sort of, desired motion is given for both robots. But the robots must be what I call social. If one of the robots perceives somehow a disturbance, then also the other robots should sort of wait for the disturbed robot and not just simply go ahead. Think about the two robots are lifting a heavy glass plate. If one robot, for some reason, is slowed down shortly, and the other one just continues the desired path, the glass plate will fall. So that is what it was all about. So the idea is to design a controller that achieves the trajectory tracking, but at the same time preserves this social behavior of the robots. And we'll see that in the next movie. And this is Alejandro in the younger period. And Alejandro is a disturbance, and you can't see it now. It's not so good visible, but in the next moment he will provide a disturbance in a horizontal motion of the right robot. You see, he tries to hold it up. If you carefully inspect, this robot will sort of wait similarly than that one. So it's like the two robots are mechanically connected, which is of course not true, and that is the subtlety here. Whatever happens at one of the robots, here or there, they are cooperative and will sort of wait for each other and then resume and try to cover up their paths. After this, we went in my lab in Eindhoven very much to more the similar questions, but in mobile robotics. And there are several aspects there. Probably one big motivation already, this was say when we started to work on this in Eindhoven, this was probably 2004, 2005. One big motivation is, of course, traffic use. You can say, okay, at least I can start to think about how to control traffic using ideas from robotics. So that is even including automated highway system. At the very end, I will show you a movie. We finally reached something very interesting there. Transportation is, of course, an issue there. As an aside, we started to work in mobile robots early, as I said, 2004 or so. It was in 2012 that my university, and I was sort of one of the founders of this robot soccer team, that here in Mexico City, we became world champion. I think all of you have watched this, but you probably didn't think about it now, but I was very proud about it. This was coming back in, at the house of the mayor. We were sort of brought in. I must admit, this was even broadcast the same night at the Dutch national television, but it was also because the Dutch national team was eliminated without any success in the European Championship. So that helped. What are issues if you start to think about mobile robotics? Well, there is, if you want to create cooperative control, in the end, there is also, the more robots you have, you can't sort of combine the control of all the robots just from one place. You want to have a sort of decentralized command saying, these 3 robots drive in this lane from A to B, and the other 5 drive from B to A in the other lane. So at the same time, you want to achieve this robust in a robust manner. Soccer robot told us that was extremely difficult. The first time when we participated in any championship was a very disappointing experience, I can tell you. The first games we played, every time when we had the ball, say the ball shootout or so, after 10 seconds, the rules are the ball is free also for the opponent. Our team or software was built so slowly that every time when we had a kickoff or whatever, we were too slow even to take the ball and shoot. This, in the beginning, that was really a big issue. It still is a very important issue in robot control. Localization, sensing, etc., mapping, all kind of effects, some of you may recognize that, are relevant in this sort of questions. There are a couple of Mexican researchers, that's a particular reason I bring this mobile robotics here, that also worked in, say, in the context of this subject. Alejandro Alvarez, he sort of worked on what one could say the network effects, and a very particular one in collaboration with Toshiki Oguchi, is a Japanese colleague of mine with whom I have a very long-standing collaboration. We were thinking of having 2 robots, mobile robots, one in Eindhoven, one in Tokyo, and have them move synchronously, cooperatively. Which is then, of course, that makes this network effect. We used internet as the medium to communicate. That becomes a very serious issue. But as a sort of motivation why this is relevant, you can also think about a surgeon making an operation in the US for a soldier that is in Afghanistan, as an example. We try to cope with this, and this particularly the long-distance communication is an issue there, and long-distance communication accounts for time delay. 0.2, 0.3 seconds time delay is there, and that makes it, of course, very hard, challenging to have the robots, mobile robots, to drive synchronously their desired paths. So that was the main question for Alejandro, and sort of he proposed to use in that context the predictor type of methodology, a Smith-type predictor, but of course this is a highly nonlinear system, making it really a challenge. America Morales, years later, came back where we much more focused. She spent 1 year in Eindhoven as a postdoctoral researcher. We focused much more on, again, on the mobile robots synchronization, but also different topologies and formation control. And I, just as an illustration to give you an idea, where is this about, I give you one movie. Sort of the setup is very standard. You have a set of robots, epoch robots or any other type. This is you need a PC laptop with communication with the robots, and there is a camera system just to ensure you can localize where each of the robots are. That's sort of the basic setting, and Dragan Kostis was very important in building up this piece in my lab. And then here is an illustration. Let's see if it works. This one was made by America Morales, where you see, okay, the robots follow a desired path. They don't follow it anymore. I don't know, where is that? There is a desired path, but they follow each other. That is the desired. I'm sorry, it's apparently America, sorry. But America is in fact a very good intermezzo. America acts here like Alejandro previously as a disturbance. She is taking one robot out of the formation, and thereafter the formation continues. So it's good you don't see the disturbance for now. Huygens synchronization. Huygens is, this sounds as a complete different track, and probably it is, but it's for me very much, ideas are very much on the same line. What to show you, there are some, say, old ideas and some very new ideas, some history and some future, I would say. Here, and I always start a presentation on synchronization. I always started with this slide. The history of synchronization goes back, at least in scientific literature, to Christian Huygens. And if you, this is, well, I wouldn't say a photo, a drawing of Christian Huygens. And he's my grandfather, or to be more precise, grandfather. 17th century, and this is one of his famous notebooks. There are many more, actually. And one particular reason I want to show him and his work is because of the next slide. This is a slide. These are figures, drawings made by him, taken from his notebook. And what you see here, two chairs, a beam, and two pendulum clocks hanging on the beam. You may ask yourself, but that's a whole separate story, and that would require another hour to explain why would he build this setup. I mean, it's not a very trivial thing. In particular, if you read in his notebook that he mentions, well, he was ill when he made this experiment, and sort of the first idea, you must be extremely ill to make an experiment as such, but he had a very good motivation to do that, but I leave that for now. What he wrote when he about this was, he said the following: the communication was all done in Latin. That's a very interesting thing. That was, of course, the language of communication those days. But the English translation says, hence, when the two clockworks, the two pendulums, were at small distance separation, I began to suspect a certain sympathy. And the word sympathy is put here more prominent, as if one were affected by the other. And this he wrote in a letter to his father. And it is a very interesting thing. And what he meant with that is the following. You see here, and actually this is not the one I wanted to show. You see here the sympathy that he observed. This is really what he observed. What you see here, the two clocks, the two pendula, move in antiphase. This is what he described in his notebook. Now, going back 1 second, Huygens was 17th century. He was little before Newton. There are people here in the room who didn't know Huygens before. Promise me afterwards you will never forget Huygens. But Newton was, say, the founder of differential calculus. Maybe Huygens was already getting involved in that a bit, but certainly not, differential calculus was not around. Notions as force, energy, differential equations did not exist. So he wanted to understand why is this happening. And he rightly pointed out this beam. This beam is sort of the medium between the two clocks. And that's of course correct. The beam acts as a sort of medium for energy transfer from left to right. And the minimum sort of energy is exactly in this antiphase situation. You can do the same analysis, and I change the... It's a very simple change, and then you see. You also might think about in-phase synchronization. Actually, we have studied this quite a bit. Jonathan Peña was involved in that. Certainly, Huygens seemed to be aware that this would have been possible, but with his data, with the chairs, the clocks he used, he could not have seen this. If he could have seen this, he would even become more convinced, yes, the beam is of course the medium. The beam for the in-phase synchronization, the beam, you very clearly see that. The beam will move, very small motion, this is exaggerated of course, will move with the same frequency as the clocks move. That would have helped him a lot to understand better why it worked, but that was impossible for him at that time. Now, this is interesting, but this is all with words and still without any true explanation, and particularly questions as why did Huygens not see this, but only see the antiphase synchronization. So that was sort of the starting point that I was going further into that. And so exactly why, when is antiphase, in-phase synchronization happening? And it's of course, we have by now, 4 centuries after, we have the tools, we must have the tools, so to say, to understand this better. And so we developed a whole analysis on this kind of problems in terms of developing the right models, and then try to study what are the parameters, the relevant quantities that influence the in-phase, antiphase synchronization. Now, as mentioned, Jonathan Peña, I think 7 years ago, maybe came to Eindhoven to do his PhD. And so I proposed this subject, and he was sort of modest enough. He said, okay, that's fine. He didn't dare to say no, but I think it was a very good choice to go ahead on this. And sort of the relevant parameters that play a role in this are the coupling strengths that you can understand. You can understand it better if you think about replace the beam by some rigid structure. If you have a rigid structure and then 2 pendulum clocks, they will not synchronize. Don't worry about that. So yes, the coupling strength should be sufficiently okay, but otherwise there's no chance, of course. Without coupling, no way. Too low coupling, it will not work. Damping in the system is important, and mismatches between the oscillators, between the clocks is of course also an issue. Now here are 2 movies. This is the first setup I built in my lab when I started to study Huygens. And you see here very rapidly the antiphase synchronization appears. This is just a platform, a rigid platform, connected to the fixed world by leaf springs left and right. 2 metronomes, all in all, setup is €100. And it was a very successful start of a line of research, I would say. But it was very inspiring to have, from a very early stage, already before Jonathan came, such a setup. And I would advocate that a lot also here and in many other labs. Now this is the follow-up, and this is really something both Jonathan and I feel proud about. Jonathan, after completing his doctorate, at some point came in contact with the clock manufacturer in Zacatlán in Puebla. I say it right here. And after some talking, they were willing to build the experiment we wanted. May I say it that way? And it's very nice. They produce monumental clocks for churches, but here we proposed, and they were sort of surprised to hear our request, may I say it that way. And after some thinking, they built a platform. You see that here. It's just a wooden table with the 2 pendulum clocks on it, and this is what it goes. Let me see. Now I could continue now and leave this for quite a while. For 1 minute. You can't believe this will continue very, very long. And if you don't believe, go to Zacatlán in the museum. You find this setup and with the explanation also. I'm very sort of proud of having such an experiment running in Mexico. Then this is sort of what I would say. This is the future, and some ways this is again sort of about partly in collaboration with Jonathan. What you see here, when you start to think about these metronomes or clocks that synchronize when connected to a beam, you also start to think about, hey, if I have instead of 2, when I have 4, or 2, but now on different levels, so vertical. And well, first the tick-tick, you already feel a little bit confused. What you see here, these are all 4 are synchronized. Jonathan is in the meantime, this is in Jonathan's lab, is in the meantime changing some of the system parameters by adding extra mass at the top level here. And it's interesting to see how the frequency, this is now, what was it, in phase, but you see the amplitude of the pendula is becoming different. And the big question we ask ourselves in this sort of studies is, how can we explain and predict that sort of behavior? Certainly with 2 metronomes, this is still fairly well doable. With 4, 5, 6, it becomes really a challenge, I can assure you. Finally, I want to go back to cars and automotive application. I gave on Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, a presentation, a more extended presentation on cooperative vehicles. I'm running a large project on cooperative and autonomous vehicles, really a big program. And I don't believe in autonomous vehicles. So that is sort of maybe contradictory in a sense. I don't believe they will really be there in the coming decade or so. We will make big steps, but autonomous vehicles that are completely driving by themselves, that will be the hard nuts to overcome in probably another 40, 50 years. The point is that traffic, if you have a regulated form of traffic, Metrobus lane in Mexico City, we can very quickly come, and probably we should even encourage that to come to a sort of cooperative driving on a Metrobus lane, provided that no one else comes and sits and walks along the Metrobus lane. But as soon as you want to have an automated autonomous vehicle in a city where also pedestrians, cyclists, whatever are running around, then there will be a difficult task to go. So I prefer at the moment cooperative facilities, and I particularly want to focus now a bit on the coordinated adaptive cruise control. And the idea is very simple. Cooperative adaptive cruise control is sort of, maybe the other word which is perhaps more known is platooning. And the idea there is have your vehicles drive in a platoon. That means that if the lead vehicle is accelerating, all others should accelerate. If the lead vehicle decelerates, all the others should decelerate in a similar fashion. That's also what we as humans try to do. Why we as humans cannot do that so well, and neither the Mexicans in Mexico City can do that well, is we are slow. We have a reaction time less than 1 second, and if you're very well prepared, even you can think about 0.6 seconds or so, but still it is considerable. And it makes that cooperative driving in a platoon is for humans very difficult. Now the idea is to automate that, so to say. So one reason to do this is, of course, comfort, safety. If we do this right, we do it better than humans. The mobility is then improved because you can have vehicles driving at closer distance, so more cars per kilometers, that increases mobility. And for commercial vehicles, fuel reduction is a very serious point. Actually, this is money. This is sort of indirect money, and this is indirect money. This is very interesting. So the commercial vehicles have sort of probably the first real part to go. Now, where is this? I just show you the setting for cooperative driving. Everything is sort of standard except for this piece. That is wireless communication between the two cars. And what you do with that, and that's the only technical point I showed in the next slide, the only technical part, what do I do with the wireless communication? I add a feed-forward signal. And the feed-forward signal says or translates the acceleration, deceleration. And it's not going to be the driver that receives the feed-forward signal. Of course not. You directly implement that on the CAN bus of the vehicle. And then you only have the communication delay, which is, say, 0.1, 0.2 seconds. And that's much better than the 1 second time delay that the human driver normally experiences. So this is our control structure. This is normally what you see here. This is sort of the standard structure, except we need to add this feed forward. I have an animation. I'm not going to show you, and I don't think I should do that in given time. I give you here an animation. And this is first adaptive cruise control. And you typically see here, so the human driver, you see the vehicles, there is a moment. So this one accelerates, it takes a while before this one will follow up. And now we go to the cooperative version. And now you see it, you can see they brake, but you hardly see any congestion or closing up a gap closure of the vehicles. That is what we also did in experiments. I could have shown you that, and I'm not going to do that because I want to show you one other experiment as to end. So I skip this one. By the way, Carlos Mucha, who sent me yesterday a very nice sound tape congratulating me on this event, which I really appreciate. So I like to mention that. He did his thesis a couple of years ago on, again, network synchronization, but now with limited information, which is, again, he never worked with this car type of application, but it's, of course, very important because you're not communicating all the information, velocity, acceleration, position in this setting. So it's a very relevant work in that sense. Cooperative adaptive cruise control is one step towards autonomous vehicles, and I hope I have explained why I say this is a step towards. What is still missing or still ongoing is to bring in steering. And cooperative, to have vehicles that also steer in a cooperative manner is very challenging. And I can explain this easily in words. If your vehicle you have two vehicles. The front vehicle takes a turn to the left. If you communicate that, you can also do that with the following vehicle. But of course, you shouldn't do that. You should only steer left once you have reached the intersection or the corner where you have to steer. So it's a very subtle thing when the steering really should be activated in the following vehicle. This is still an issue that many people work all around the world. I have 3 PhDs working on aspects of this, so showing it's really a challenge. There is still a lot to be done. Another issue to make here is if you believe in further automation, say also including some kind of vehicle road or infrastructure communication, there is some supervisory control needed. I mentioned that more extensively last Tuesday, but I want to give you in the next slide an illustration. I probably have first show you the movie and then I'll explain it again. Okay, this is a big success. I understand you all agree on that. Now, what is this? This is an intersection. The traffic lights, you should forget, they were not in use. Yeah, you saw the red-green light, but they were not used by the vehicles. You saw 3 vehicles. This was last year, 2016, so now 2 years ago. We had the Grand Cooperative Driving Challenge in Eindhoven. And one of the challenges was an automated way of passing an intersection. Here there were 3 cars. And think about the 3 cars, number them, 1, 2, 3. And they form a platoon. They are virtually a platoon. The 1, 2, 3 says who's going first at the intersection, who's going second, who's going third. And they sort of adjust their velocity so that this is indeed happening. I'll show you the movie again. So you see the truck there, you see this one, and you see the other one. And clearly the truck was holding up a bit, then in order to give the vehicles at the right place. A very interesting success, I would say, and this was worked out in great detail. Alejandro Morales Medina is a PhD student of mine who particularly worked on developing this sort of supervisory control strategy for platooning for an intersection. Of course, this requires a lot of communication between vehicles, but particularly also communication with the infrastructure. But it shows we can do these things, and I think it's a very nice illustration for how cooperative technology could in the end help for autonomous vehicles probably. Okay. I think I've reached what I wanted to say, and I just want to say a very heartily thank you to all of you, particularly, of course, Rafael Castro being sort of the beginning, the cause of everything, my first contact basically with Mexico, so I appreciate that a lot. Joaquin and Jaime, also very much appreciated. Alejandro, from a very long time onward, he was not the first Mexican student, but certainly one of the most outspoken Mexican students, may I say it that way. And of course, for today, I'm very thankful for this event. And I certainly hope to continue my cooperation with my Mexican colleagues. Thank you for today.
Well, we have time for some questions. So if anyone has some questions for Dr. Nijmeijer. Okay, go ahead.
In order to minimize the energy, okay?
Yeah.
And if you have three, how do you minimize the energy?
Okay, you have some extra time for today? So I think we need a couple of days now. There are, as I mentioned, and what came out from research work that Jonathan Peña and I did, and that was published in scientific reports, is there are a number of structural parameters that play an enormous role in this in-phase, anti-phase synchronization, already for 2 pendula. It must be clear that immediately if you go to 3 pendula, that this is also the case. What you didn't, your question is very imprecise. This is a joke. How are the 3 clocks positioned? In a line, or are they?
In a line.
But you could also do this differently. And that all these aspects, so the structural parameters play a role, but also the geometry, how you position the clocks. There are, both in my lab, I think Jonathan is also pursuing that, other people are pursuing that, often in simulation, but it's interesting to do this in experiments. Also is, there are some very interesting experiments out showing, okay, you may have full synchronization of 3 clocks. You may also have sort of phase shifted, so not necessarily anti-phase synchronization. There's a Japanese colleague of mine, I'm not good in Japanese names, apologies for that. You can find YouTube movies of 60 metronomes on a platform, put up a platform and showing synchronized motion. I visited his lab. It's impressive to see there is no theory at all underlying it yet. But it's a good question, but there are so many parameters relevant to decide upon what will happen that it's not so easy. You saw the 4 metronome experiment in one of the movies, yeah, and that worked easily, pretty easy, but we constructed it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any more questions? No questions, no comments? We have time. No? Okay, Eduardo. Well.
You were speaking about cooperation, synchronization. At some point, we're speaking about formation control for microbots. And well, beyond formation, there is marching control or trajectory tracking of groups of robots. But for me, all of these ideas can be traced down to a consensus problem. Modulo, some change of coordinates, perhaps time-varying change of coordinates, but everything can be traced down to consensus problems. So, what would you think is the relationship between the ubiquitous consensus and synchronization?
I think I largely agree with you. On purpose, I mentioned at the very beginning, I did not even want to distinguish between coordination, cooperation, and synchronization. I think much of this goes under the same umbrella. Of course, be careful. Once you start to think about, okay, formation control, you have to make precise what you exactly mean. I can phrase it in a synchronization framework if I want. I totally agree on what you say.
So in a very abstract way, you would say that synchronization or cooperation is consensus?
Yeah, but it's all about what is the index that determines what. There is always a sort of coordination index to be defined, and that is precisely the issue. And that is what I'm saying. It doesn't matter what you want; you have to define properly the coordination, the formation index, and then you are at the same level. And it can be. I'm not saying that each problem is equally difficult to solve. That's of course not true. I mean, the index is completely different, or might be completely different. But I think you can cast this all in the same framework.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hank, my most sincere congratulations on this recognition that we have witnessed today. I believe you have cooperated enormously with the Mexican scientific establishment, and we're really proud of having a friend like you looking to the Americas and the part of the Latin America that we live in. Nowadays, everybody seems to be working in some kind of problem in which networks are part of the formulation, and cooperation, synchronization, consensus, and so many other variations of the same idea. I remember in my old days, I was studying under Fred Schweppe, and he handed me a book of a couple of Japanese researchers, Tahako and Nakahara. I don't know if you're familiar with the name or the names. And they were following something that was initiated in Case Western Reserve University. And it was called decentralized control at the time. Sanjoy Mitter in MIT was doing quite a lot. He published one of the first books in decentralized control. And some of the schemes involved interaction estimation, interaction cancellation, interaction prediction, and so many other variations of words that somehow I haven't seen in the modern literature when they try to solve a precisely formulated problem in terms of linear or nonlinear systems. And since everything seems to be taking part of those ideas and moving forward with magnificent experiments, my question is, where is all this going? Do you see a big possibility for research lines in which young people in our environment can engage in and then put forward some new knowledge about this?
Thank you, Herbert, for the very kind words. And I agree, and I'm actually, probably we are almost of the same age. No, I'm much younger, sorry about that. I'm much younger than you are. But I remember also, I mean, Ikeda's book on I think also decentralized control, notions as aggregation. I think that's all in the same arena as that you described at the beginning. I think there is some usefulness in that old decentralized control there, but it's rather limited, I see. I mean, decentralized control has taken a complete change and different development. Is there future? I think without too much exaggeration, for each person in the room, there would be easily a decent research question in this context. I was collaborating with 10 IFAC colleagues over the last 2 years on a document, on a paper which has been published last year. And those of you interested, I will share that with you with great pleasure, where we try to explain what is the future of control. And it touches upon a lot of what I've said today, touches upon what you were indicating. Control is everywhere, but it's often very much underneath. It's if you think about energy, windmill parks or so, in the end, to make enough energy from a windmill park, there is a serious control problem. If you think about any evolution in autonomous robots, autonomous vehicles, Industry 4.0, as it is called today, at least in Europe, or in the modern industry plans, it's all about a sort of revolutionizing robotics, because going back from the standard pick-and-place machines, the robots become more and more autonomous, and that brings in all kinds of network effects, as I've mentioned, in automotive, but also in robotics. And the more automation you want to have in a fabric, the more you don't want to have a central person organizing everything. You want to decentralize as much as possible there and have, say, an autonomous robot that can achieve a lot by itself and just receiving tasks as go from A to B along route C or something like that. There's a lot of development there, I think. I hope that answers your question a bit.
Okay, are there any more questions? More questions? So I think that's all. Thank you, Hank.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Congratulations.